Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Kojo's Corner. This is episode 11. Wow, we've had 11 episodes. Great. We are back for the fall. We had a break during the summer. Last week, we were talking to Luke LeBrun from Press Progress, and we were talking about journalism. And now we are segueing into local journalism. So today, I am excited and happy that we have the one and only Rick Zamperin. If you were a fan of CHML, every morning you would hear him on the airwaves, and now we don't hear him on the airwaves anymore. So we invited Rick to kind of talk to us about his time at CHML, how the state of local journalism is here in Hamilton, who's going to fill the void now that CHML is off the airwaves. So, Rick, welcome. How are you doing?
Kojo, it's great to be here. Number two, it's great to see you do this because for a number of years and times I got to interview you, so it's kind of nice for you to interview me, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. I'm hanging in there. I'm doing good. I'm trying to keep busy. It was certainly, and I know we'll get into some of the details of what happened. It certainly has been a life-changing experience, a very jarring experience, a very shocking one as well in terms of coming to grips that this iconic brand in Hamilton, one that literally hundreds of thousands of people would wake up to, turn on, keep on throughout the day, drive to and from work, listen to for the latest news and information, to be entertained, to just have a part of their day interact with the hosts, whether it was a call in or email or text line, whatever the case is, social media connections. Not having it is there's a massive void in this community. I know that there's other media entities trying to fill that void. Um, it's going to be difficult for them to do, and I know we'll get in it, but I'm doing okay. To answer your question, I'm doing okay.
Yeah, well, we're happy to hear that you're doing okay. You know, when when anyone loses their job, the thing that they love doing, it's very terrible, and I'm sure arrangements were made to make sure that your long dedication and work to CHML is at least appreciated. So, um, how is everyone else doing? Do you stay in touch, Shona Thompson, and all the other regular folks that were coming? Like, how are you checking in on everyone, making sure that everyone is doing well?
Yeah, we're all one big happy family. We have a Facebook page that one of us on the team created, and we kind of interact there. We're always kind of texting each other, whether it's Paul Tipple or you mentioned Shona Thompson, Dave Woodard in the newsroom, Lisa Pileski or Ken Mann reporters for so many years, and all the behind the scenes people
Yeah.
as well. The producers, the content producers, people at the front desk, sales staff, engineers, the list goes on and on, promotions. There were
Mhm.
so many people impacted by this that, yeah, we're staying connected. We're very supportive of each other. We know that, the range of emotions over the last, number of weeks has been felt from, shock and anger to sadness, disappointment, kind of bewilderment. There's really a roller coaster of emotions that I think we've all kind of felt, and that anyone would feel with any job loss, that they've been in this job for so long, they've had a deep connection to their clientele or their customer base, and in our case, it was listeners. It was regular Hamiltonians who would tune in and or read our stuff on the internet or follow us on social media, or see us at community events and put a name to a face. Um, so yeah, we're trying to be there for each other. I think we're doing a very good job at doing so. We had a great team at CHML in which so many people were there for so many years, where we knew each other's relatives and we knew what people were doing on vacations, and we would kind of hang out at community events or social functions. It was so fun to be with that team, and even though we're not going in and day out, still having that connection and that friendship is absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So you talked about, everybody knows the history, or some components of the history. On X, I saw people even sharing old pictures of where the CHML radio was located. Can you tell us how long you were there, and what are some of like the critical moments that you were part of, or that you think are important to remember around CHML?
So I started November 29th, 2000. It was actually my father's birthday, and I have a funny story about that in just a second. And I started as a part-time traffic reporter. There was a need at CHML. There was an opening, and I was fresh off a job loss in Brantford. There was a numbers game that I got caught up in, and I was looking for work. And so I contacted Paul Tipple, who was the news and program director at the time, and I said, "Hey, Paul, I'm available." Went in, had about a 2 hour chat. My wife was pregnant at the time, waiting in the lobby, thinking this interview's 2 hours. She had to pee real bad because she was pregnant. And that's one of the funny stories about it. But Paul liked what I had brought to the table, and I started as a part time traffic reporter. So I would give details of, gridlock or accidents or slowdowns or clear highways and city streets in the afternoon. And that
Mhm.
quickly transitioned into a reporter's role in the newsroom. Very bustling newsroom with legends like Bill Stirrup and Jeff Story. Of course, Paul was there as well. Shona was there. So many amazing people in that newsroom. And I got to finally be a reporter where I'd go out to, whether it was crime stories or city hall or, just stuff that happened in the community that was of importance to our listeners. We had to be there. And I had the pleasure of covering so many different things. There's in my time at CHML, there's a number of unique and special kind of events that I had the pleasure of covering. And maybe the first real one was the 1 year anniversary of 9/11. So September 9th, 2001, we all know what happened at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and in the field in Pennsylvania. And so a year later, we managed to secure studio space at WOR Radio in New York City. And I, at the time, was producing for The Roy Green Show, which at that time was broadcasting from 9 to noon on 900 CHML. And Roy, still to this day, an iconic commentator and announcer and talk show host, presenting still, 50 years later at CHML, some of the biggest interviews and guests and topics. And so Roy drove to New York City, and I tagged along with him to produce the show. And we had some heavy hitting guests. We had two shows on the 1 year anniversary, and it was just so enthralling because Roy was losing his voice. He was worried that he wouldn't have a voice for this mega show that we were we were performing, two shows back to back. And we had the likes of Brian Mulrooney, Pamela Wallen, who I think was the U.S. ambassador to Canada at that time, and the list just went on and on in terms of big name guests that we had arranged for this show. And I remember going to a Yankees game. It was Yankees Orioles doubleheader. New York won the game 3-1. I remember Raul Mondesi hitting a home run to left field, and I also went to the top of the Empire State Building
Mhm.
because you're in New York. I don't know when the next time I was going to be there. And I remember telling Roy later that night that I had gone to a Yankees game and Empire State Building as he's trying to recover from his, almost losing his voice. And he's like, "Rick, like, you're nuts going to the top of the Empire State Building on the 1 year anniversary of 9/11. What are you doing?" Security was extra tight. It was a great trip and a phenomenal experience. And Roy never ended up losing his voice. He recovered in time, had a spectacular couple of shows. So that
Mhm.
was one of the big highlights early on in my career at CHML. The other one for sure was the 2003 blackout.
Oh
Most of
yes,
Southern
I remember
Ontario,
that.
yeah,
Yes.
most of Southern Ontario is in the dark, northeastern US in the dark,
Yes.
and in some cases for days people didn't have their power. And I remember going to the Hamilton airport because there were some issues in terms of flights landing and just being at a number of different spots in the community, whether it was gas stations because people were lining up to get gas, worried about whether they can go to the grocery store to get groceries, visiting people in their homes because they didn't have power. They were throwing out all this stuff from their fridge and were really worried about, this power outage. So that was 2003. And then the next major milestone for me would have been 2007, in which, as a young boy, I really knew what I wanted to do early on as a career. And that was be Bob Cole, broadcasting hockey games on Hockey Night in Canada. I loved just describing what was happening on a sports field or court or ice surface. And in 2007, I became the announcer for the Hamilton Tiger Cats football games on 900 CHML. So I was in the broadcast booth with the legendary John Salavantis, calling the games, announcing touchdowns, and going on road trips with the team and flying in and out and just seeing the hijinks of a professional football team. It was so much fun, and got
Mhm.
to do that for 8 seasons. The final game that I called was the 2014 East Final between the Ticats and I think it was Montreal. Hamilton wins, and I just had a great experience with the Tiger Cats. And apart from that, I was a sportscaster for a long time. I was a news anchor. I was a producer. I was the assistant program director, which had a supervisory role of a collection of technical producers who were just absolutely magicians on an audio board and did so much behind the scenes work. It was unbelievable the amount of things that they had to do. Um, and yeah, at the end of my kind of reign at CHML, the last couple of years was hosting Good Morning Hamilton,
Mhm.
and that was another huge highlight and a major accomplishment. I did not think I would be a morning show host at an iconic station like CHML
Mhm.
at that point in time. But Jeff Story, my boss, my program director at the time, gave me the opportunity, and I jumped right at it to be able to talk to Hamiltonians every morning, have them wake up with my voice, not to sound arrogant, but I got excited about it because I wanted to talk about the big stories and tell them about what was happening in the community. So there in
Yeah.
a nutshell is kind of my run at 900 CHML.
Yeah. So since you became the early morning voice for Hamilton, can you tell us like your favorite person or interview that you had other than me?
Mm.
Uh or even like an interview that you found very difficult, right? Because I
Mm.
think as an interviewer or somebody that talks to someone regularly, sometimes you get to interview someone and you're like, ugh, it's hard to get stuff
Yeah.
out of the person you're talking to. So can you just give us share that with us?
Yeah, I don't know if I have one highlight of one person being an extraordinary interview because I think everyone kind of brought something different.
Mhm.
There were, as you kind of described, some interviews where I thought, wow, that didn't go well at all, or, I should have asked this, later on. Um, but there were so many great discussions that we had, whether it was the mayor or city councilors or, people in the community at McMaster University or Mohawk College or just general citizens, whether they're raising money or organizing a fundraising event, updating the community on whether it's the stadium or the LRT or the homelessness crisis. I
Mhm.
can't really pinpoint one sole guest or interview, just to say that they were all, I think, impactful in terms of allowing the community to kind of digest the information and then kind of make a decision for themselves to whether they wanted to agree with the guest or agree with me or disagree with both of us or just kind of take it in as information.
Mhm.
That was kind of where I wanted the show to go, to be a source of information, a source of entertainment for people to have fun, to kind of be a distraction in our crazy world that we live in. So that's kind of how I went about kind of planning the show.
Hmm. So and your that's a great answer, by the way. Um,
You were
so
a
that
close second, though, Kojo.
yeah, no, it's all good. Um, you mentioned one thing, and you talked about the depth and breadth of people that came onto your show and the things that they were talking about and the community events and the giveaways and all of that. So now that we don't have that, where like what who and what is going to fill the void? I mean, we have the spec, we have CHCH, we have Joey Coleman, um but the radio is like a key component. Like I look at CHML, I compare it to like the CBC radio in Toronto,
Mm.
right? You had your Matt Galloways and stuff in the morning. That's how I would see CHML. So now that we don't have CHML, like, what do you think is going to happen to that void that has been created?
It's a great question, and I'm not sure that I have the answer. To be honest, I wish I did, but I do agree that there is a massive chasm in the community because, with all due respect to the Spectator and CH and even CBC Hamilton, the
Oh
online
yes,
publication,
yeah.
and
How could
and
I
people
forget
like
CBC
yeah,
Hamilton?
and people like Joey, who's trying to do his best at City Council with some of the big issues. There isn't anything in Hamilton like what CHML was, because it was really at any point of the day you could take a call on the air from someone in the community who had a concern or an issue or a question or an idea and have a conversation. And you can't quite do that the same way with those other mediums. And I don't think there's another radio station in town, and there's some good ones that kind of do it that way. There's a huge void with news and information on the radio right now in Hamilton. What I think most listeners are being forced to do is go to other cities like Toronto because there's a lot of major stations there, or maybe get their information in the podcast world, which I know is huge, and there's a lot of amazing podcasts out there. But that liquidity of radio, that livability where you're actively listening and participating, we've lost that in this community, and it's really sad and really unfortunate that we don't have that anymore. And maybe there's an outlet out there or a company out there that is planning to do something similar, and I would encourage them to do so because it makes a difference in the community. I think we're worse for it for not having CHML around any longer.
Hmm. And I want to also make note that we do have campus radio, CFMU,
Yep.
Mohawk, and others. Do you think maybe um, there's uh, there's an opportunity for those radio stations to maybe um, fill that void?
Absolutely. I think any radio station who wants to connect with the community has that opportunity. The question is, how do they go about doing it? Because the two that you mentioned, McMaster and Mohawk, they've been around for years.
Hmm.
They have to do a better job, in my opinion, of saying, "Hey, we're here. Come listen to us." And not only that, but have opinions that matter to Hamiltonians. Have shows that connect with people in this city. Talk about the topics that everyone is talking about, and try to do that in an open and honest way. It's great to have an opinion, but can you hear the other side? Can you dissect what others, experts or others in the field, are saying and kind of relay that information to your listeners? I think those two entities are there. They now have to take another, if they want to fill this void, they have to take another step, maybe two or three steps, to kind of get to where CHML was.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's going to be a challenge, and hopefully, maybe they are listening, and maybe this spares others into thinking about what we do in that radio realm.
Hmm.
Bef- can I ask another question? So,
Absolutely.
you know, the one of the things that I have heard, and I've this is not my first time having a journalist on here. I think the first time was when we heard about the mountain news. We invited Kevin Werner and Joey and Greg and Fallon, and then last week we had Luke on, and all of them kind of said, the state of journalism in Canada is really suffering. So, based on your experience, like, what is the right environment to create a radio that doesn't suffer like what we saw happen with CHML?
Well, yeah, that's a big question, and I'm not sure I have all the answers, but I do have a couple of opinions. And I think first and foremost, they have to get the formula right. And when I say the formula, I'm talking about dollars and cents, because let's not forget, radio is free. You do not have to pay. I mean, if you wanted satellite radio, sure, you're going to pay a subscription.
Hmm. Hmm.
But radio, as CHML was, as a number of the big or even small stations are, it's free. And the only way that they are able to operate now is to sell airtime. So, Kojo, I'm going to sell you a commercial for X amount of dollars. And now we have to sell a bunch of other commercials for X amount of dollars to pay for the staff that we want to employ to get our message out in the community. And if it's an FM station, 99 times out of 100, they're playing music. So the reliance on resources, aka staff, isn't as great as what CHML had. We had a number of many more staff than our FM colleagues in the same building, and many experienced staff. Not to say that we were all millionaires, because it was far from it, but it was more expensive to operate CHML than the FM radio stations. So for this to work, the formula has to change, I think. And I'm not sure it means you have to now pay for radio. But I'll say this, in the not too distant future, and it's kind of happening right now, when you buy an automobile, you're going to have to pay a subscription to have heated seats or air conditioning or special elements in your dashboard. There might come a time where it's, oh, if you want to listen to X, Y, and Z radio, you have to pay a subscription. I'm talking about all radio. And so I'm not sure how long that is going to take or how far we are from that standpoint, but I can see a day where that happens. We're already paying for things in our car right now. That could be the next big thing. So I think the formula has got to change. But I think when it comes to journalism, it's a bit of a scary place right now, because there's a lot, and I mean a lot of disinformation out there right now, whether that is primarily on social media, but there is online as well. And you kind of hear about it second nature in the coffee shops, or commentators talking about it on TV and some on the radio as well. Disinformation is absolutely troubling.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure we can stamp it out, but we can call it out.
Mhm.
Because when we see something that is incorrect, factually incorrect, or leaning towards a certain political entity, and it's not right, and it's an outright lie, we have to say, hey, that's not true. Here are the facts.
Mhm.
And that's where I see journalism right now.
Mhm. Let's follow up on that, because last week when I talked to Luke from Press Progress, he said he feels like the model or the formula, using your
Mhm.
words, is that maybe you have two or three journalists come together and they form a non-for-profit to then provide that journalism, and then you have that option of that subscription. Because I think if my memory serves me right, one of your one of the guests that you used to have on your show, Sabrina from Queens Park.
Sabrina and Angie, yeah.
Yes. So she has a paid subscription model, where
Hmm.
if you want to read more, you need to pay. So do you think maybe that's the model that we're looking at, and do you think it's viable for radio?
I think we'll get there at some point. The difficulty I have believing is that there's going to be many options under that formula. So there could be, in a subscription, let's just call it subscription radio. We already have satellite radio. I don't think that's going to be changing, because that's been around for a while. But if, tomorrow all of a sudden you had to pay for listening to the radio, the question would be, how many people are going to do that? And are they going to do it right away? And so while the example of Sabrina and Angie is a good one, that is one journalist. Now get a team together, and now you're talking about a little bit more money, because now everyone on that team wants to get a little bit of the cut as well,
Yeah.
right? Um, so while, yeah, I see it working, I think it's got to have the backing of a major corporation, if you will, a major company to say, this is how radio is going to survive, or this is how journalism in radio or on radio is going to survive. Um, it's survived for well over 100 years, but in this day and age,
Yeah.
it's getting more difficult.
Mhm. Yeah, I really find this discussion important, fascinating,
Hmm.
and very revealing, because all of us depend on some form of journalism
Yes.
to either know what's going on, make a decision, and even as you were talking about disinformation, there's a prospect of three elections coming up pretty soon,
Yeah.
and we all need some information to know how to decipher who is saying what, da 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 da, all of that stuff. So I really think is important and crucial. On the topic of disinformation, you know, seeing that you've been a journalist for over 2 decades, you've done traffic, you've done producing, you've done the talk show stuff. Like, what would you say are your top three things that people can should be paying attention to ensure that they are not engaged in or are not susceptible
Hmm.
to disinformation?
Well, I'll say this: it's sometimes it is rather easy to get fooled in terms of seeing something or reading something, and you may want to believe it because it's maybe you agree with that position. But at the end of the day, you have to do your own homework as well. And this is where kind of the demise of CHML really hurts because we as journalists did that homework for people. And so you would tune in to CHML to not only hear opinions like I had, but factual news stories to find out what was happening in our community. And so whether it's a federal election or provincial election or a municipal election, all three that we're going to have probably within the next, who knows, 18
Yes,
months.
yes.
Yeah. Um, there is going to be, and there is right now, a lot of disinformation. So people have to do some homework. When you hear something or see something, don't just take it face value. Try to do some research. Maybe contact someone who is in a journalism field, or throw out a question on social media if that's where you're seeing it. Kind of push back and don't be not necessarily gullible, but don't be believing everything you see.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, everyone, it's Facebook, X, um, Instagram, everywhere,
Mhm.
barbershop, saloon, it's everywhere. So, yeah, we all have to stay vigilant and do that extra work. And I think sometimes, it's challenging for individuals to do that challenging work, and that's where journalism comes into play. And
Yeah.
even journalism also holds some of our institutions accountable for some of the things they do or do not do. So,
Mhm.
um,
I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm glad you brought up the barbershop thing too, because that's a great example of or you're sitting in a bar or you're in a club with a bunch of friends and you say, hey, you know what I saw on Facebook, that thing about yada yada yada, and it's not true. And now you have 7 or 8 people kind of believing that hacks actually took place. So it's extremely dangerous in terms of spreading that disinformation. Very easy to do. And the other thing you mentioned too was the holding people accountable, and I think we did a great job of that. Bringing on elected officials or people who ran companies, the decision makers of our community, bringing them on the radio, whether it was a news story or an interview on the morning show or the afternoon show or the evening show, and kind of asking those difficult questions. How did you get to this decision, or what are the ramifications? How's it going to impact our taxes, or whatever the case was? We
mhm,
had the opportunity to do that, and right now that is missing in this community, and it's sad.
yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, even with CHML in place, everybody's like, where do I get my news from? And like I said, it just like even with me in the mornings, you wake up early, you're getting ready, you just CHML, whether it's listening online on the actual on the actual AM,
Radio. Yeah.
you're like, yeah, you're just listening, you're taking it in, whatever the information is, you're just taking it in, and it's starting your day, right? So not having that, I mean, I personally, I'm every morning I wake up, I'm like, what am I listening to? So
Hmm.
it's a big loss and a big challenge. But um everybody can see there's lots of tiger cat memorabilia behind you.
Yes.
So you were doing, or you continue to do the fifth quarter. So first of all, there might be people watching. We in fact we have lots of folks tuning in. There might be people that might not be familiar with the fifth quarter. Can you tell us what the fifth quarter is? But before you do that,
Hmm.
let me tell you a story, and let me tell you something that I liked about you.
Okay.
So, every time after the Thai Cats game, you would always go into your office
Yes.
and open the door. Depending on whether they won or lost, you would have a reaction. I must say, I would watch that just to see what your reaction is. So, you know, yeah, that was one thing. I would watch. So, anyways, fifth quarter. Tell
Mhm.
us about the fifth quarter.
So first off, what you're describing is that it was about I think it was sometime last season where I thought I got to do something fun in association with the Tiger Cats, and so I did these videos on social media in which the heading would be, Tie Cats fans going into work the next day or whatever the day was after the game, and when they won, it was very exciting, and the worker was very happy that the Tie Cats won. When they lost, and they've been losing more often than not over the last little while, it was a very different story. A very sullen employee, one
Yeah.
who's crying or not having a good time. So thanks for the feedback. I am planning to continue that, but next
Okay.
season. Next
Good.
season.
Good. Good.
Yes. So to the fifth quarter. So for years, this lived on as a radio show on 900 CHML. It started back in the 50s and 60s, where after every Ticats game, the announcers of the day, whether it was Pursallen or Norm Marshall or unit Bob Bertina, Bob Hooper, the list goes on, would after the game talk to the fans. Talk to the player, the coach, but then the true essence of the show was, hey, how do fans feel about what just happened? Who did they like on the field, or what are they grumpy about after this game, or where do they see the team going from here? Should they make some trades? Should they fire this guy? Should they get that guy? What lineup changes do they have to make? And so for decades, Ticats fans came to 900 CHML not only to listen to the games, but listen and participate in the fifth quarter. And some people were angry and some people were happy. And depending on what happened on the field, those two emotions were certainly felt by the host. And for almost 10 years, I got to host the show on CHML. Every Ticats game would come and go, and after the game, I would be on the air talking to the fans, more or less hearing from the fans because it was a platform for them to kind of share their view. And I always said it was the easiest show to host because they were ready to engage, they were ready to
Mhm.
offer their opinion, and I would basically say, "Hello, what did you think?"
Mhm.
And the calls and the emails and the texts and the social media responses would just flood from there. And it was a show, and it continues to be in its new form, all about the fans. This is a show where Ticats fans can come and rejoice or curse, and or somewhere in between.
And
And so
I'm sure lots of cursing these days.
there has been I'll tell you this: when the show was on the radio, we did have a censor button because obviously, some kids might be listening, or someone listening might not want to, really
Yeah.
appreciate that language. And I only used it a couple of times because people would let a curse word slip. I don't think they intentionally, you know, ended up doing so, but only a couple times I had to actually use the censor button.
Yeah.
So with CHML going the way of the dodo bird, sadly,
Mhm.
the day after it happened, August 14th was kind of D-Day. The next morning, I kind of woke up and thought, wow, there's a Ticats game this coming weekend. They were playing Edmonton on the Saturday. I thought, wow, this show has to live on. Like if there's one thing that I do,
Mhm.
let's keep this thing going.
Mhm.
And so I thought, well, how am I going to do this? I don't have a radio station anymore to go into and talk to these fans.
Yeah.
I thought, well, probably the easiest way to do it is to go on YouTube.
Mhm.
Most of our listeners, if not all of them, are familiar with it. I know my kids were like, well, how about Twitch, or how about some of these other platforms? And I thought, YouTube's probably the most uniform and easily accessible. So I thought that's the platform to hop on.
Yeah.
And so after the game in Edmonton, just a couple of days after CHML ended its broadcast day forever, I launched the new fifth quarter show on YouTube, in which, again, after every Ticats game, I'm kind of talking to Ticats fans to learn from them how they felt about the game. We vote for the player of the game, and I think we have a lot of fun.
Hmm. Yeah. So this is where we do the information. So if you're a Titan fan, you want to know what Rick Zamperin is talking about. Fifth quarter show on YouTube, and it's fifth five,
Number
not
five,
not
five
yes.
TH, fifth quarter show.
Yes. And you know what? I think there's 699 subscribers right now.
Wow.
So all of you that are on there, please make sure you are the 700th subscriber.
I'll say this: I didn't really have any expectations for subscriptions. I thought literally for the first game there'd be like 12 people
Yeah.
and like ten family members, right? And a couple of strangers thinking, "Oh, what's going on here?" But the support has been overwhelming. It's been unbelievable, really, the amount of people who have not only subscribed but just sent me messages of encouragement and support. I have had a handful of people reach out to say, "Hey, I'd love to sponsor the show," and right now I'm kind of just doing it for fun, really, to
Mhm.
keep busy, and it is keeping me busy. I don't want to mess with the package that I was given, so for the time being, I'm just kind of doing it because I know fans want it. I know there's a need in the community. I'm trying to fill that void. We talked about a massive void in the community. For this little show to continue, I think there's a big need to talk about this football team that everyone loves and everyone cheers for, and I'm happy to do so.
Yeah. So again, fifth quarter, subscribe on YouTube. Again, we need the 700 subscriber right here on Kojo's Corner. We need that. We need to get to 700. So all of
Nice.
you that are watching, go on to YouTube and subscribe. So now that we're on the topic of the fifth quarter, I mean, I listen. I will say this. I'm a very I like sports, but I don't follow it like
Mm,
attentively. So
mhm.
I pay attention to sports. I watch basketball is my favorite
Right.
game, but I do follow CFL, NFL, all of that. So now that we have you here, what I can say is that, or what I know is that the Ticats have not been doing really well. Um, can you share with us one why, like what's happening? Because I think before the season, everybody thought, okay, we have Bo Levi Mitchell healthy,
Mhm.
ready to go. There were some rookies that were looking good, right? New coach, OC, every DC special team, everyone was like, Grey Cup, here we come. And then, things just went downhill from there. Tell us what's going on.
Well, I'm not sure if it was a Grey Cup or bust kind of mentality in the preseason. I think there was a lot of fans thinking, this team could probably be a good team. There's a number of good players on the field. They made a couple of improvements in free agency. The draft didn't really uncover any superstars, but it was a pretty solid team. So they would challenge for a playoff spot, maybe even challenge for first place in the division. But fast forward a few months, and this team has won 3 games and has lost 9. So it has been difficult. They fired their special teams coordinator earlier in the season. Quite recently, they fired their defensive coordinator, head coach Scott Milanovich, who's also the offensive coordinator, trying to get the right pieces in place on the field. And I think, and I kind of said this, even at the start of the season, the biggest question mark with the team was defense, because offensively there are a number of known commodities. Whether it was Bo Levi, as long as he remained healthy, I think we knew what he was going to do. Tim White, perennial all-star in the Canadian Football League. Other weapons like James Butler, well-known all-star, and a guy who can run the ball effectively and score some big touchdowns. On the defensive side of the ball, Simone Lawrence announces his retirement, or his graduation, as he called it. Ted Laurent retires from the Canadian Football League. Tunde Adeleke leaves as a free agent. They don't re-sign Chris Edwards. Jamar Thurman, their middle linebacker, goes to another team. They had so many changes on defense. In fact, there were only 3 starters from last year back with the team this year. And so at the start of the season, I thought we have to be patient with this defense. It's going to
Mhm.
take them at least a month to kind of get on the same page because there's so many new moving parts. And really, that's kind of what came to be. The offense was good. Bo Levi was throwing 300 a game, couple of touchdowns a game. James Butler running effectively. The offensive line not allowing any sacks. Slow start for Tim White, but Shamar Bridges, this rookie who kind of came out of nowhere, has been sparkling all season long and might be the favorite for Rookie of the Year. Defensively, though, and even special teams at the start of the season, they struggled. And so, in any level of football, if you're only winning one phase of the game and not two or all three,
Mhm.
it's going to be a challenge to win. So fast forward all these months, I think they're a little closer to figuring out their kind of defensive identity. Chris Jones, their new senior defensive assistant who replaced Mark Washington, I think is pressing kind of a few of the right buttons. They have an energy at least on defense. We saw that on Labor Day in the big win against Toronto. The offense is still kind of producing. The special teams has gotten a bit better. So I think the team is trending in the right direction, but they still have a lot of work to do to get to where we thought they would be at the end of this season. So with a handful of games left, their backs are against the wall. They don't have much room for error. It's going to be exciting to see how they end this season.
So man, this is great. See, you gotta subscribe to the fifth quarter. Anything Ticats, fifth quarter. So are they going to make the playoffs?
It's going to be difficult because they are behind the 8 ball. They have to leapfrog a few teams, right? Toronto is kind of within striking distance. They do have another game against the Argos later on in the season. The other option is to be the first ever Eastern team to cross over to the West. But what they need to do is finish in third place outright in the West Division. And right now you have Winnipeg, BC, and then Saskatchewan has kind of been reeling over the last number of weeks, and then Edmonton, Calgary. Edmonton is surging. Calgary's kind of falling. Winnipeg is surging. BC seems to get their feet from under, kind of a struggling phase. Saskatchewan's kind of sliding. It's going to be difficult for Hamilton to cross over. So I think the only way they get into the playoffs is if obviously continue to pile up the wins and hope that Toronto kind of slides because Ottawa's played great this season. Montreal has already clinched a playoff spot. So it's going to be really tough for the Ticats to do it. Objective number one, win their next game September 14th against Ottawa at home. And if they do that, maybe they start believing that, wow, if we pile up 4 or 5 wins in a row, which a couple of weeks ago would have seemed impossible, if they can somehow do that, they would be in a great position to go to the postseason.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I know that all the Oski we fans out there are hoping that happens. Um, yeah, so everybody pray, go out, cheer them, and hopefully, hopefully things work out. I totally forgot that we had some comments. So there was a big shout out from Lisa who said best
Mm.
team ever. Hi Rick. And everyone, Lisa, you would see Lisa in the community. Literally, you would
Mm-hmm.
see her at press conferences when things would happen in the community. You would see her with her microphone, her notepad, and everything, writing stories. So, Lisa, thank you for your reporting and
I worked with
all the
Lisa for
work.
many years, and as good of a reporter that she was, and she was a great reporter, she's an even better person. She is an even better person. She's a phenomenal human being, has a caring heart. I think her favorite story, she might disagree, but I think her favorite story was the Peregrine Falcons at the
Ah,
top of the Sheraton Hotel.
yeah.
Phenomenal story. Every year covering that, we had a blast and a great laugh and a great time covering that story, which seemed really insignificant but I think got a lot of people excited, a lot of people happy about this amazing thing that would happen in downtown Hamilton each and every year.
Yeah, yeah. Big shout outs to Lisa.
Hmm.
And then we have Mark Anderson. Mark is one of the fan favorites of the show. Mark, thanks for all the comments and tuning in. So we talked fifth quarter, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because you've been involved with the organization, you've seen them, you know what's going on. I would ask, and this is just a question for me because I always follow the Grey Cup when it's time for the cup. Uh, how come Hamilton hasn't won? Um, because there's obviously a tradition of winning by the Thai Cats, but like in the last 2 decades, let's use your time as a journalism as the framework.
Hmm.
uh it hasn't been that much. And I think when Winnipeg won, Winnipeg's QB used to be the QB for Hamilton. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. So why is it that close but not close? It looks hard. It doesn't look like we're getting there. Last year the winners were Montreal, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. And Montreal came to Hamilton, right? And that, it was yeah, not so happy. Why do you think we are always close but never getting it?
Yeah.
What's going on?
This is the $1 million question. How much time do we have? Because this could take a while. I don't think, first and foremost, there's any coincidence with my arrival in Hamilton in 2000 that the Ticats last won in 1999. I cannot take the blame for that. It's pure coincidence.
Yeah.
It is a mystery, Kojo, to be honest. It is a mystery because you would think in a 9-team league over the past 25 years, and this year's the 25th anniversary of the last time the Ticats won the cup.
Mhm.
In a 9-team league, odds are that Hamilton would have won it by now,
Mhm.
but they haven't. And there are a number of reasons. Sometimes the luck of the draw just didn't happen. Jalen Ackland catches a football in the end zone back in 2021, and this team wins the Grey Cup. Brandon Banks returns a
Yeah.
punt return
That
for a touchdown at
yeah.
BC Play Stadium against Calgary, and there's no penalty. Hamilton wins that game.
Mhm.
Hamilton comes a little better prepared for their first meeting against Winnipeg in 2019, and maybe they win that game. 2013, the one and only Grey Cup that I called as a member of the Ticats play-by-play crew. They went into Regina against a red-hot Rough Riders team that had home court advantage, home field advantage, and really was never in that game.
Mhm.
And I would say first and foremost, there's a lot of pressure on this franchise to win because the fan base expects them to do so after so many years of not getting a championship trophy. Um, from a roster composition standpoint, they need to do a better job of not only finding up and coming Canadian and American players, but then holding on to them, signing them to longer term deals, developing them into stars or superstars, and then keeping them on the team. You mentioned the Winnipeg quarterback, Zach Caleros, was a guy who came to Hamilton from another team, but they had him for a certain amount of time. And at one point in time, Zach suffered an injury. They
Mhm.
had Jeremiah Masoli on the team, and they thought, well, maybe this is a good time to transition to Masoli, which they did, but that never materialized into another championship trophy. And so with every team, and there's no real easy answer with it, there's a push and pull. You have to press the right buttons. You have to sign the right free agents. You have to make sure you're healthy. And then when it comes to game day, you have to perform.
Mhm.
And for this team, in the biggest games, they've been to 4 Grey Cups since 1999. They've lost them all. In those big instances, they have not been able to get over the finish line. And as a fan, it's frustrating. As a community booster and supporter, it's kind of bewildering because you're thinking, wow, one of these years it's gonna happen.
Mhm.
Hopefully within the next, who knows, 2 to 5 years, it does happen. This year is probably a very, very long shot for it to happen. So 2025, here we come.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe the 2025 new version of the fifth quarter
Yes,
will allow for
here we
a
go.
Grey Cup. Yeah.
Here we go.
So we've done CFL Grey Cup. Yesterday NFL started. This
Mhm.
and folks that are watching, this is the first time we're talking sports, and we gotta talk sports because we have Rick here. So I'm sorry, you might have tuned in. We did talk about journalism, but we have Rick here. This is probably the one and only time we might talk sports on the show. So yeah, yesterday NFL started. Kansas
Hmm.
City, Baltimore,
Yes.
Kansas wins. Which who's your team?
The team I cheer for, and somewhat reluctantly because they have not won a championship in a long, long time, is the Miami Dolphins.
Okay.
So their last title came in 1973, which is a long
Was
time.
that the perfect season?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, long time ago. Listen, they went back to back, which was great, but I wasn't born at that time. They have not won a championship in my lifetime. Very similar to the Toronto Maple Leafs, another team I cheer
Ay,
for.
ay,
You're
ay.
seeing a theme here, Kojo. Ticats, Dolphins, Maple Leafs.
Maple
My wife made a
Leafs.
comment a few months ago that you cheer for all the crappy teams. I'm like, no, they're just unlucky. So yeah, I cheer for the Miami Dolphins. They have a
Okay.
very exciting team, a very fast team, but I think a level or maybe even two below that of Kansas City or even Baltimore that we saw last night that put on a phenomenal performance. Two very talented teams, and the National Football League, just like the CFL, is very fun to watch. There's many more teams, many more different fan bases, rabid fan bases. One just down the highway in the Buffalo Bills. It's great action. It's great drama. And I think this season is going to be like the others, very exciting.
Okay. So then, Miami, we got Tua, we got Tyreek Hill, we got
Hmm.
Waddle, we got Jalen Ramsey. Do you think they can win the division?
I think they can. Whether or not they will remains to be seen. But I think they have the tools in place. They're very, maybe not similar to the Ticats, but we know what they are offensively. They're a very fast team. They use a lot of motion. They have a quarterback who has been successful in this league. Maybe not to the extent of a Bo Levi Mitchell, who's won a couple of championships, but Tua Tagovailoa has an arsenal at his disposal that can really move the football, score a lot of points. Much like the Ticats, we don't quite know what the defense is going to do in Miami. There are some pretty good pieces there, but how do they handle the Josh Allens of the world, or the Lamar Jacksons of the world, or this weekend, Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be a test in Miami. So I'm hopeful. I think they can win. The Jets, I think, are going to be better. If Aaron Rodgers are healthy, they will definitely be better. I think the Bills are an interesting team because they've lost a couple of weapons, both on offense and defense. But with Josh Allen there, I mean, the sky's the limit. He can carry that team, and he has on his back. Can he do it for a full season? That's going to be really interesting. New England's going to be in the basement, and if they're not, then something really bizarre has happened in that division.
Hmm. So, does Mahomes do the three-peat?
So, no team in the history of the NFL, the modern day NFL, has three-peated, has won
Hmm.
three consecutive championships. There have been a number of teams that have won two in a row,
Yeah.
but in that third season just can't get to the finish line. I think if there is a team, this is probably the one. Because as good as Mahomes is, and Travis Kelsey's there, and we saw Xavier Worthy, outstanding speedster in a rookie receiver, Isaiah Pacheco, the running back, they get a pretty good offensive line. It's Kansas City's defense that is carrying this team and did so last year to the Super Bowl and the Vince Lombardi Trophy. And I think that defense is just as good, maybe if not better this year. So they're going to be a tough out. They're definitely going to make the playoffs unless they suffer a massive amount of injuries, and probably one to Mahomes, and knock on wood that doesn't happen because he's so fun to watch. Come playoff time, to beat Kansas City, you're definitely going to have to be on your best, and hopefully they're at their worst or they're slipping up from time to time, because yeah, that's a tough team to beat.
Yeah, yeah. I say they probably do it. I don't think the Ravens it's one of those things, right? You can never beat the it's like Karl Malone versus Michael Jordan, right? It's kind of that
Yes.
that thing.
Well, for me,
Um
I go about who's going to beat Kansas City in the playoffs.
mhm.
Can it be Baltimore? Perhaps they were close last year. Even last night's game was really close. Um, Can it be the Houston Texans, who are an up and coming team? Can it be a team like the Buffalo Bills, who, had their shot last year?
Hmm.
Maybe it's an Aaron Rodgers led Jets team that has an unbelievable defense. Maybe the Dolphins do get kind of lucky on D and they find that missing link. And then even go to the NFC. Can Green Bay do it? Can Philadelphia do it? Can San Fran do it? They've had a couple of shots and haven't been able to do so. Can another team, maybe like Dallas,
Please,
Detroit, can
please
these
don't
teams
say
do it?
Dallas.
Yeah, it is. It's tough. It's tough. Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs are a very tough team.
Yeah, maybe Joe Burrow. He's the one that has gotten through.
Yeah,
He's back from injury, so maybe he might crack that problem. So we'll see. Well, thank you very much. It's just it's great to hear from you, to see that you're doing other things, and just like in true Hamilton fashion, I know there'll be people that will subscribe, that will reach out, that will say how can they help, and all of that. So we're wishing you all the best. Hopefully next year, fifth quarter, we'll get some updates, and maybe we can invite you back to tell us what those new updates are, and maybe we can say the only time we talk about sports on Kojo's Corner is when we invite Rick.
I'll be happy to come on again. No doubt about it. I really appreciate all the support in the community thus far. Looking forward to continuing the fifth quarter show. And yeah, you can subscribe on YouTube, fifth quarter show, and even email as well, fifth quarter show at gmail.com. And you can chime in after the game or anytime during the week, and I'll be eager to reply.
Okay, there you have it, folks. We're from the one and only Rick Zamperin. Now you can hear his beautiful radio voice. He has that radio voice on the fifth quarter. Last question,
Okay.
and you are not obligated to answer, but I just think it's a question that I have to ask because this is Hamilton tradition. We know there have been many journalists that have gone on to run for office. Are you
Are you asking me whether I want to run?
Yes, I'll just leave it open. You don't have to answer. It's just that in Hamilton, it is a tradition.
Mhm.
Like from back in the day, you can even talk about recent. And I just wanted to ask so that people know that I did ask. And maybe it's also one of the options for you.
I'll answer it this way. As I've told a number of people who have a number of different ideas for my future, is that I'm open to anything that makes sense. And if that makes sense, I'll take a serious look at it. So I won't rule it out, but I won't say yes. I'm kind of sounding like a politician already. Anyway,
Ah. Well, either way, I can say I had the pleasure of asking that question.
there you go. I'm happy to provide my non-answer, Kocho.
Oh, Rick, thank you very much. We truly we wish you well, and all jokes aside, I know some folks will reach out and support you. And again, folks, you might not be into sports. You might just want to hear about what's going on with the Tigers. I think the place to be is sign up on the fifth quarter. And again, you can follow Rick on Twitter and Instagram just to hear what he's up to. So thank you all for tuning in. We will hopefully see you next week on Friday with our guest. We're still finalizing who that guest would be. So just follow us on Instagram and on X, Kojo's Corner, and you'll find out too. Thank you all and have a great